Most men think muscle loss starts when the body looks obviously smaller, but that is usually late. The first signal is quieter. You recover, but not cleanly. You train, but the return is weaker. You stay active, but the body stops acting like the same input is enough. Most men read that as motivation, testosterone, or just aging. Usually it means something more specific. Your muscle is becoming less responsive to the signals that used to preserve it automatically. And if you miss that early shift, the decline starts long before weakness becomes obvious. Let's look at the mechanism behind this. One of the key ideas here is anabolic resistance. That phrase sounds technical, but the meaning is practical. Muscle becomes less responsive to the same inputs. The same protein meal does less. The same lifting session produces a weaker structural response. The same recovery window buys back less than it used to. Research suggests older muscle often needs a clearer anabolic signal than younger muscle does. A 2011 review in Nutrition and Metabolism examined how aging muscle becomes resistant to normally robust anabolic stimuli such as amino acids and resistance exercise. That does not mean growth becomes impossible. It means the system becomes less forgiving of random habits. When you are younger, you can often get away with inconsistent lifting, scattered protein, poor sleep, and uneven eating patterns without noticing the cost immediately. After 40, that same level of noise tends to show up more clearly because muscle is not only aesthetic tissue, it is functional tissue. It helps regulate glucose disposal. It supports posture and movement. It stores amino acids and glycogen. It acts like reserve. So when muscle becomes harder to maintain, the problem is not only visual, a lot of other systems quietly become less stable too. Research also points to age-related deficits in muscle protein synthesis signaling. A 2005 study in the FASEB journal found that elderly individuals showed less anabolic sensitivity and responsiveness to amino acids, possibly due to decreased intramuscular expression and activation of amino acid sensing and signaling proteins. So the issue is not only that men move less as they age, it is that the biological return on useful behavior often gets smaller unless the signal quality improves. That is why a man can still be active and still feel like he is slowly losing ground. He is doing something, but the system is no longer rewarding vague effort the same way it once did. Now for the intervention layer. That leads to the practical question: what do you do with that? The first step is to stop treating muscle maintenance like it happens automatically. After 40, muscle needs to be defended, not with panic or bodybuilding obsession, but with structure. That usually means three things: repeated resistance training, enough protein, and enough recovery for the training signal to actually convert into retained tissue. This is where many men make a subtle mistake. They assume the problem is lack of intensity, so they train harder, add more volume, chase more soreness. But often the bigger issue is not insufficient punishment, it is insufficient signal clarity. For example, protein. A lot of men eat protein in a vague pattern: very little at breakfast, almost none at lunch, then one large dinner that is supposed to repair the whole day. That can feel acceptable because total daily intake may not look disastrous on paper, but older muscle is less responsive to small or poorly distributed protein feedings. Evidence-based recommendations from the Pro-T-Age study group published in 2013 suggest older adults need at least 1.0 to 1.2 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight per day, and that protein should be distributed evenly across meals to optimize muscle protein synthesis. So the useful question is not only did I eat enough by night, it is, did I send enough clear maintenance signals across the day? That is a very different question. Because muscle maintenance is not only a daily math problem, it is a repeated signaling problem. The same applies to training. After 40, muscle is less impressed by random heroic sessions surrounded by inactivity. It usually responds better to repeated, recoverable structure. 2 to 4 resistance sessions per week, done consistently, often beat one emotionally intense session done inconsistently. That does not sound dramatic, but boring structure is often what preserves expensive tissue. The body keeps what it repeatedly needs. If you continue showing it that force production matters, that stability matters, that muscle is still required, then the argument for preserving muscle remains strong. If that argument fades, the body starts simplifying through adaptation to lower demand. This is why men often misread what is happening. They think they are suddenly less disciplined, but often the real problem is that the body has become less tolerant of weak instructions. And when signal quality drops, adaptation drops with it. Here is the system interaction to keep in mind. That is why recovery matters so much here. Muscle is not preserved by training alone. It is preserved by training plus recovery plus nutritional permission. If sleep is poor, if energy intake is chaotic, if stress remains elevated, then the growth signal gets noisy. The body receives mixed instructions to build, conserve, train, and survive simultaneously. That kind of mixed signal often produces stagnation instead of progress. And stagnation is dangerous because it looks normal. A man can sit in that state for years, not injured, not sick, just slowly becoming less structurally capable. That is why the goal is not simply more effort. It is better signal quality, a clear training stimulus, a clear recovery window, a clear protein structure. When those line up, the body has a much better reason to preserve muscle. The trade-off is that chasing muscle with constant volume can backfire. More sessions, more soreness, more nutritional obsession are not always better. If the full system cannot support the plan stops being anabolic and starts becoming expensive. So the aim is not aggression, it is coherence. You want the training, the recovery, and the nutrition to tell the same story. When they do, muscle maintenance becomes far more realistic. After 40, muscle loss usually starts before weakness becomes obvious. It begins earlier, quietly, in slower recovery, in weaker response to training, in the feeling that the same effort no longer buys the same result. That is the signal to pay attention to, not the visual change, not the scale, not some eventual moment of obvious weakness. The signal is the drift, the quieter shift in how the body responds to the same inputs it used to handle more efficiently. And catching that signal early is what makes the difference between managed decline and preventable structural loss, because strength is not only performance, it is one of the clearest ways to tell the body that capability is still required. After 40, that message needs to stay loud enough to be heard.